front Bibi's red line. The Prime Minister of Israel literally drew the red line for Iran's nuclear program today as he addressed the UN General Assembly.
Here.
See him there? And he paused for effect. Now look at that rather crudely drawn bomb. This was no Colin Powell moment. This was a purposefully simple diagram, kind of like a cartoon, designed to make what Benjamin Netanyahu believes is a very serious but simple point.
By next spring, at most by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
But in his speech to the United Nations this week, President Obama did not give any such timeline. He certainly didn't draw a red line.
So let me be clear. America wants to resolve this issue through diplomacy, and we believe that there is still time and space to do so. But that time is not unlimited.
Netanyahu thanked the president for what he acknowledged are tough sanctions, but he was clear to say those sanctions have not impacted the country's nuclear program. And he did give a veiled comparison between Obama and Neville Chamberlain. That, of course, is the British Prime Minister who signed a peace deal with Hitler after allowing the Germans to invade Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain called that deal peace for our time. And today, Netanyahu brought up World War II and appeasement directly.
If the Western powers had drawn clear red lines during the 1930s, I believe they would have stopped Nazi aggression and World War II might have been avoided. Those who opposed that fanaticism waited too long to act. In the end, they triumphed, but at an horrific cost.
So do the claims about Iran's nuclear program add up? Majid is the author of The Ayatollah's Democracy and The Ayatollah Begs to Differ, and he is out front tonight. All right, obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been making this case passionately and aggressively for a long time.
20 years, yeah.
20 years. And he put up this red line, obviously wanting to respond to the international community for Israel, lay out exactly when you think we should act, giving people a pretty direct timeline,
right.
Which is right before you get to the top line, which, given the timeline he gave, is next summer at the latest for some kind of action. Does it add up?
Which may or may not be accurate, by the way.
Right. So that's the question, first of all, from your understanding. I mean, obviously, this whole question is what is Iran really doing with its nuclear program?
Well, that's the first question. I mean, we claim to know. The Americans claim to know. The Israelis claim to know. The Iranians make a claim about what they're doing with the program. One of the interesting things about this so-called 20% enrichment cap, like putting a red line on it.
Yes.
And I'm only laughing because it is comedic, the bomb.
Well, the presentation was
the Wiley
purposely
Coyote,
comedic,
and it's been, Twitterverse has gone crazy with this, and including in Israel itself, making fun of him. But no, I think the thing about the 20% is really interesting because the Iranians have offered, just this week, have offered to suspend enriching at 20% in exchange for something. So they want something in exchange for stopping the 20%. They have also, what Netanyahu didn't mention, is some of the 20%, in fact, a large portion of the 20% enriched uranium that they have created, they have turned into fuel plates, which is unusable for bomb material at that point. Fuel plates to put into the Tehran reactor. So that timeline of June or July or summer or sometime next year may or may not be accurate. I mean, the assumption would have to be that they're continuing the same pace of 20%. They would never stop that 20%, and they wouldn't convert any of it into fuel plates, which they have done.
Right. So now, 20%, though, to get to 90, I mean, a lot of people say, hey, it's 20, you need 90 to make a bomb. But I think to be very fair, to get from 20 to 90 is sort of like that relative to getting from 0 to 20, which is a very extended process.
Iran has always argued that they need the 20% for their medical reactor in Tehran because they went to the International Atomic Energy Organization and said, we need some fuel plates, and no one was willing to sell it to us. So that's their argument.
Right.
Whether you buy the argument or not is irrelevant. The point is, I think the main, really interesting point about the speeches this week is that we're not going to have a war this year. I mean, that's
this year.
Clear.
But next summer, I mean, it keeps being put, it's a 6-month thing. It's keeping the whole world on edge.
But let's not forget Netanyahu 20 years ago said that Iran is 6 months away from a bomb, or 8 months away. He's had these ideas about it. And that's all of this contradictory notion that came up today, which was that if they're messianic and if they are irrational, then what does a red line do to an irrational messianic person?
Right,
So
well, that's who he's saying red lines will work, but if you're...
Well,
okay, but the IAEA, the report he referred to, and he made it clear, everybody, I'm not even referring to Israeli intelligence, although I have more of that. I go online, look at the International Atomic Energy Agency report, and what it says is that their nuclear program is accelerating. I'm looking at the one from August, that they have doubled the number of high-speed centrifuges at their underground bunker facility, Fordow, which they don't allow inspectors into.
No, inspectors are there.
But not as much as the IAEA has requested.
No. The IAEA has requested Parchin, which they've not been allowed to. Fordow is under complete inspection. All the uranium that is enriched there is under lock and key and under camera. So that's not correct. That the IAEA has never said. Parchin is a military base, and the reason the Iranians are saying you can't go here is because you have to present evidence as to why you want to go to Parchin.
And now,
so I think it's a bargaining point. Parchin is a bargaining point.
Parchin is a bargaining point, but let me ask you this. Is it possible that what Iran and Israel are doing for Iran's purposes, they say that this is for peaceful purposes, but obviously they're leaving open the door, and they're not allowing the inspectors, and there's all these things that they're doing.
They are allowing inspectors in. Inspectors are there, but not to the military bases.
Right, and they're leaving open the door for people to think that they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Is this in their interest? Keeps them relevant? Keeps them in the center of the world stage?
Well, I don't think
because if they weren't trying to get a bomb, who would care about Iran?
Well, you care about Iran because they're still a powerful country with a lot of oil, and we care about every country that has oil and exports oil. It's a nation of 80 million people, almost 80 million people. It's geographically very important. It's had a tremendous amount of influence in places like Lebanon, in Afghanistan, and Iraq. And in some cases, our interests are actually mutual with the United States and Iran. So I think it is an important country without
So you don't think they're doing it as attention seekers?
No, I think they've had a problem for many, many years with the West, particularly with the United States, where they believe, whether it's true or not, but they believe that the U.S. is out to get them, out to destroy the regime and overthrow the regime. And just even this recent delisting of the MEK, the opposition group that was in Iraq, that they claim is another example of the U.S. only interested in changing the regime. So we've had many, many issues between the U.S. and Iran over the 30 years. The nuclear issue has gotten to the point now where we have harsh sanctions that are hurting the people, hurting the economy, hurting everyone. Probably not the regime so much, but they're hurting.
Right, not nearly as tough as they should be, at least from our reporting. But
well, I
mean, if you were really trying to shut things down, they're not.
Well,
they're very leaky.
They're not that lenient. I mean, I think people find a way to get around sanctions.
Right, leaky was the word.
Leaky, sorry. And but I think that right now, with these sanctions, Iran would like to come to some kind of agreement with the West on this nuclear program, but they want sanctions lifted, or at least some of those sanctions lifted. You know, as the Russians had proposed at one point, a step-by-step process. The Iranians do something, the U.S. does something. So far, that hasn't happened. I think it's an election year. I think President Obama can't do anything politically this year with Iran. But given that there's not going to be an Israeli strike at this point, based on Netanyahu's speech today, at least for the next 6 months, we're going into the new year. We're going to a re-elected president or a new president. All
right, well, Hooman, thank you very much. And that does appear to be the bottom line, that if there is to be an Israeli strike, with or without U.S. support, it's going to be after the election. That's crucial. And that brings me to our third story.